Let's start with a recent event. It took place in a formal meeting room, but it was all about something that happened hundreds of miles above the Earth. At the United Nations Security Council, one nation made a direct and formal accusation about the actions of a commercial company from another nation. And with that, a quiet, long-simmering tension has really come out into the open.
So here's what happened. During a session that was all about the challenges of operating in low Earth orbit, a representative from China brought up a very specific charge. It was leveled against a network of satellites that are run by the American company SpaceX. The claim was that the company's satellites created a dangerous situation, one that forced China's crewed space station, Tiangong, to take immediate action. And the details were very specific. China said that satellites from the Starlink constellation made two separate, quote, dangerous approaches toward its space station. Because of this, the station crew had to perform emergency maneuvers to get out of the way and avoid a possible collision. And you have to understand, the stakes are incredibly high. At orbital speeds, we're talking over 17,000 miles per hour. Any impact would be just catastrophic. So the Chinese representative didn't frame this as a technical glitch, but as a direct and serious threat to the lives of their astronauts on board.
Now, this one accusation, as big as it is really just a symptom of something much, much bigger that's been happening. To get why this is all coming to a head right now, we need to zoom out and look at the environment where it's all taking place. The space right above our heads, what we call low Earth orbit, has completely transformed in a really short amount of time. It's just not the vast, empty frontier it was for decades. It's become incredibly busy. Just to give you a sense of the scale, the company at the center of this, SpaceX, runs the Starlink constellation, and that one constellation alone now has thousands of individual satellites in orbit, and that number is climbing all the time. But they're just one player among many. This is a huge shift. We've gone from an era of a few big government-owned satellites to this new world of massive, commercially run networks. The sheer number of objects up there has created a kind of congestion that was just unthinkable even 10 years ago. It's gotten to the point where close calls are becoming almost statistically guaranteed. And that's exactly why this story is getting so much attention. While the names involved are China and a U.S. company, the problem underneath it all affects every single country and company that operates in space. This rapid commercialization means that private companies, not governments, are now the main ones launching things into orbit. And they're doing it at a rate we've never seen before. It's creating amazing new services, sure, but also brand new, really complicated challenges. The old, unwritten rules of the road that kind of governed space for 60 years, well, they were designed for a much emptier sky, one controlled by just a few governments. This incident is a pretty clear signal that those old rules just might not be enough anymore. To really feel the scale of this change, it helps to just rewind a bit and remember what normal used to look like in space. For most of the space age, from the 60s all the way through the early 2000s, orbit was a totally different kind of place. It was pretty much the exclusive playground of a handful of powerful governments. Launching anything into space was a massive national project, something you only did for the most important scientific, military, or political reasons. Yeah, this comparison really lays it out. In the past, space was a stage for competition between superpowers. The satellites were these huge, carefully crafted machines, and responsibility was never really a question. If a Soviet satellite had a problem, you knew exactly who to call in Moscow. Now, fast forward to today. The whole scene is dominated by commercial companies launching thousands of small, almost mass-produced satellites. The tension is this messy mix of business competition and old government rivalries. And maybe most importantly, those once clear lines of who's responsible for what, they've gotten really blurry. When a commercial satellite is involved in an incident, who's ultimately on the hook? The company? The country it launched from? It's a brand new reality, and there are no easy answers. The key technology that's made all this possible is the Low Earth Orbit constellation, or LEO constellation. So instead of having one huge satellite really far away, the new idea is to launch a whole swarm of smaller ones that fly much closer to Earth. And by working together, this network of satellites can provide continuous services all over the globe, like the high-speed internet that is Starlink's main business. Now, this model has been a game changer. It's connected parts of the world that were never connected before. But it's also the very reason the sky has gotten so packed. The business model itself demands a huge number of satellites to work, and that has fundamentally changed the physical environment of space for everyone. So, what we have now is a crowded new environment and these really fuzzy lines of responsibility. And that, of course, leads to some pretty basic questions about how this new frontier is being managed, or, if it's really being managed at all. This latest accusation really brings those questions right to the forefront.
So these near misses, is this a new problem? That's a really important question. And the answer is no, it's not new. While this specific event just happened, the tension underneath it has been building for a while now. This isn't the first time an official complaint has been filed about a close call. It's probably more accurate to see this as just the latest and maybe the most public chapter in a pattern of incidents that's been growing over the last few years. It sounds like a problem of traffic control. Who is in charge up there?
You've just hit on the absolute heart of the whole issue. Unlike air travel, right, which has this very strict, regulated international system of air traffic control, there's nothing like that for space. There is no single global authority that directs orbital traffic, or sets routes, or enforces any kind of separation standards. For the most part, countries and companies manage their own satellites and coordinate with each other voluntarily. And when you have tens of thousands of satellites all operating under different flags and different rules, well, this lack of a central management system has become a huge, huge challenge.
To really get a handle on how we got here, it's helpful to just look at the sequence of events that came before this latest accusation. There's a pretty clear timeline of encounters and complaints that shows this tension slowly but surely ratcheting up. Okay, so if we look at the timeline, the first big public moment was back in 2021. That's when China sent a formal note to the United Nations, laying out the first 2 alleged close calls by Starlink satellites. So that really set the precedent of taking these issues to the international community. Then, in late 2023, the tables kind of turned. SpaceX publicly pointed out a close approach by a Chinese satellite to one of its own. And that brings us to now, early 2024, where China has once again raised the issue at the UN. You can see it's a clear, repeating pattern of escalating claims.
So this wasn't just a one-way thing?
Exactly. And that's what makes the situation so tangled. It isn't one-sided at all. Just last year, the roles were reversed, and it was the U.S. company pointing a finger, saying there's a lack of coordination from a Chinese operator. This really shows that both sides see the other's actions as a risk. And that context is so important for understanding that China's latest accusation is really a direct continuation of this back and forth, where each side feels like the other is operating unpredictably.
At the most recent meeting, China's complaints actually went way beyond just near misses. They really broadened their argument. First, they claimed a Starlink satellite had recently broken apart, creating more than 100 new pieces of dangerous space junk. They also brought up the idea of dual use, the idea that these supposedly commercial satellite systems are being used for military things, like spying or battlefield communications. That really blurs the line between civilian and military. They also talked about national sovereignty, arguing that some of these services are operating within other countries' borders from space without any kind of permission. And finally, they raised security concerns, saying these networks could be misused by all sorts of non-state groups, which creates new problems back on the ground. So we're left with this picture of a shared resource, space, that's now filled with new technology, new players, and a whole list of really big, unresolved problems. This isn't a story with a clear good guy and bad guy. It's a story about a brand new environment where the old rules are being stretched to their limits, and the new ones, well, they haven't been written yet. The certainty of the past has been replaced by a much more uncertain orbit. This whole series of events has really put a spotlight on a few critical issues. First, and maybe the biggest one, is the total lack of any global system for space traffic management. Second, is that fuzzy, blurring line between what's a commercial project and what's a government or military activity. Third, there's the question of liability. When something goes wrong up there, who pays for it? Who's responsible? And finally, there's the huge challenge of how you regulate services that are delivered from orbit, that just cross national borders without a second thought for the laws down on the ground. These are the really big questions that, right now, just don't have easy answers. You know, a good way to think about this whole situation is to see it as a new frontier, kind of like the high seas were centuries ago. It's this huge space with tons of opportunity, but it's also a place where old government rivalries still exist. The big difference now is that this frontier is packed with these incredibly powerful commercial companies who are basically writing the rules of the road just by what they do every day. They're making it up as they go. And so, for now, things remain in this state of quiet tension. Nothing's been resolved, no new treaty has been signed, it's just an ongoing disagreement that's playing out hundreds of miles over our heads. And up there, in that crowded space, the traditional lines we used to draw between civilian and military, between competition and cooperation, they're just getting harder and harder to see.
It's a complex, simmering issue that is probably going to define the next chapter of what we do in space. And this all leaves us with one final thought. This trend isn't slowing down. There are plans in motion to launch not just thousands, but tens of thousands of more satellites from all kinds of different companies and countries. The sky is only going to get more crowded. And so the fundamental question is still out there. In this new congested era, will the nations and corporations of the world figure out how to share the sky? Or is orbit going to become the next great arena for conflict?